Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Mastering Dungeons. I'm Shawn Merwin here with the newly minted in 2023 Teos Abadia. Welcome to 2023, Teos.
I'm newly minted. I like that. Yeah, I feel like a
Yeah,
collectible item.
right. Exactly.
You know,
Exactly. You were printed recently, cloned maybe,
a
but
souvenir
you're looking
plate,
good.
a gold standard, a gold
Hmm.
coin. Kind of is how I feel. I don't feel like a gold coin. Yeah,
The Franklin Mint.
I just finished driving my daughter to the airport, so we're going through that. But it was really nice to have her home. I
Oh,
took down my Christmas
yeah.
lights, the exterior ones, yesterday, and I think the tree's gonna have to follow. So it all feels very end of
Yeah.
an era ish. I guess I am a little newly minted in that respect. A lot of change.
Okay. Well, we will get you right into the flow of things here so as not to trigger any nostalgia or any, looking back. We're going to be looking forward here. And we're going to start with our Tootbag Patreon missive. And we're just going to do one today because it's a pretty beefy one. And it comes from one of our patrons, Chappy Thoughts, who says if wizards change the rules so that hitting 0 hit points doesn't render you unconscious but injured instead, at least until you fail 3 saving throws. While injured, are you limited to a single or while injured, you would be limited to a single basic attack, a cantrip, dodge, or disengage. That seems like it would solve some of the yo-yoing, would make DMs more comfortable being a little bit more ruthless, and would make the countdown we get now with death saves a bit more interesting. And this is a very interesting idea, and I love this
Hmm.
because it shows how complicated a machine these 5e rules are and how important playtesting and understanding the game is. Uh, so I wanted, Teos, is it okay with you if we dig a little deeper into this
I love it.
and talk about this in terms, not necessarily in terms of what Chappie Thoughts said or suggests, but what it means in terms of game design to think about things in this way.
Yeah.
All set? Okay,
Set.
so on previous shows, we say that rules can do a lot of things, and one of the things they do is they create an experience at the table. Uh, so we talked about in the previous episode the you are no different at 1 hit point than you are at full hit points,
Hmm.
and this is done purposefully. Game designers did not want an experience where you were less effective at fewer hit points or even more effective at fewer hit points
Yeah.
because they could have done any of that when they designed the game. So what Chappie Thoughts asks about is, to simplify this, creating a new condition. I assume Chappie's a he, used the term injured. So let's call this condition injured. So to turn this into a rule, we would say that while you are injured, or you are injured when you are at 0 hit points, but not stable, and therefore making death saves. While you are injured, as the question states, it would let you take some sort of limited action or a limited set of actions on your turn. What's the goal of this? It would replace the unconscious condition that you are currently in while you're at 0 hit points but not stable, because you are able to do nothing except make those death saves. And the goal would then be to potentially make the game, quote, more interesting. So, Chappie, please take everything we're about to say not as no offense whatsoever,
Yeah. Yeah.
because you actually ask a great question.
Hmm.
And this is something that every single game designer should be asking themselves about 10,000 times over the course of creating a game system. So the questions are, is there a problem with the way things currently are? Does what I'm going to do to change that fix the problem that we've identified? And does this proposed fix create other problems? So let's take a look at what Chappie Thoughts is saying in terms of these questions. So, is there a problem with the way things currently are? You're going to get a variety of answers depending on who you ask. So we need to identify who we're changing this for. Are we changing it for new players, for existing players, for advanced players, for players that like more story-based things? Who are we changing it for? Who would be benefiting from that? If you have any thoughts here, Teos, I've been talking for a while, so
Yeah,
please
well,
jump in.
I'll add a yeah, I think it's a great question to ask. What is the problem? And the problem could be identified as many different things depending on who you ask. So one problem could be that when I reach zero, I'm not doing anything, right? To which 5e has said, "Well, you are. We gave you the rolling a death save on your turn." And that is when you ask yourself why it works that way, the point of it is to give you something to do, as compared to previous editions where you just waited for somebody to maybe heal you. Now you're making these death saving throws. This gives you opportunities. It gives you some peril, right? Because you could hit 3 negatives. It could give you some amazing highs of hitting a 20 and being able to actually take your turn with a single hit point. Or it might just be sort of back and forth on this: am I stable, am I not track? And that's what they've done. That's been the 5e solution, right, to the problem. So, is there still a problem? It's going to depend on who you ask, like you said. And that's going to depend on to what extent you think the person who's down should be more engaged. Um, or is it that there is something else at work that we identify as the problem, right? Should people be down more often? Is that the problem instead? Is it that when you recover, a lot of people say this, when I recover from having been down, I I'm right back to normal. Should I not be, such that the penalty of going down lasts forward into the game, right? So there are a lot of things that people might assess. And I'll turn it back to you, Shawn.
Yeah, and so my question then would go to, if making the game more interesting is our goal, I would say that giving players who are at 0 hit points and therefore have this injured capability, to still take actions while you're making death saves, um, definitely adds things for players to do.
Hmm.
However, the game is balanced so that it expects you, when you are at 0 hit points and unconscious and making death saves, to not be able to do anything as part of the challenge of the game. So if you add this injured status, so people who are at 0 are able to still do things like attack, then the game is going to be easier in terms of the overall strength of, the DM's ability to challenge you versus your ability to deal with those challenges. So
Yeah.
right then, people who say the game is too easy, I can't challenge the players enough based on these rules. Now you're going to have to make another adjustment in the game by adding this. Uh,
And just to point that out,
and
right? So
yeah,
with this injured condition allowing a single basic attack, a cantrip, uh, some classes are perfectly happy using cantrips round after round. And so for some classes,
mhm,
this is no penalty at all. And for other classes, it may be a huge problem because a single basic attack prevents all of the things that they normally do to be effective, right? So that
yep,
right there is another thing that our solution doesn't apply equally to all character classes, all players, and that might be a big problem,
right. That was my next point, right?
right?
Rogues who can get sneak attack, they're fine with just a normal attack. Now, basic attack was a rule in fourth edition
Yeah.
that uh, was put in to let characters do these amazing things and then give them sort of a limited set of things, and that was their basic attack. So
Yeah.
things like opportunity attacks could just be a basic attack, or extra attacks you might be given by some power could have been basic attacks.
Mhm.
So as Teo said, you are making it uneven in terms of what different classes or different builds might be able to do then.
Yeah, if you're telling me I can
Another
only
another
use
thing to add,
Toll the Dead every single round, I'm not crying. Right.
right? Exactly, exactly. So another thing to be aware of in this is, the more the more mechanics you add to a system, the more likely is there will be one optimal choice that will be the thing that everyone does because it's the best thing to do. Now,
Mhm.
I'm not saying that's the case here. Play
Right.
testing would bear out whether that's true, but it may be if you allow people to drink potions with their action, then that's what everyone's going to do.
Mm.
Um, or it could be like uh, if you narrow it down to you can only take these four actions, right? Dodge, disengage, or help. Everyone will realize that help is the best action, and everyone will always be helping unless there is a very specific thing. So it turns into this rote. It's not more interesting then. It's
Right.
just it's one more thing that everyone knows the right answer to.
So as an example, and this just is something I'm just thinking that disengage is one of the options provided here as an idea, and it may be that then what becomes the obvious thing to do is to say, well, I'm gonna, or sorry, oh, I was thinking it was what's the default defense version?
Dodge,
Yeah, dodge. Okay, so it is on those dodge.
dodge.
So I could take
Yeah,
dodge, and now
yeah,
what I could do is that because I can't get worse, I'm just gonna go back into the dodge state, right? Like my next round, if I get downed, I'm not going to be dead. I'm going to be injured again, which I already am. Nothing here at least is telling me I can't be injured again. So I could just take dodge again because what's the worst that could happen? And I'm just soaking up hits, right? Or maybe being missed entirely. So
right.
dodge may be a really effective thing to do when you're injured because of this sort of state, at least until you get close to your third saving throw. And then you might be like, okay, I'm going to stop that now, but initially that may be a really smart move to do. And do you want that kind of behavior, right? And that is some of the problem with this, which is why a lot of times I think that when we have situations like this, it's actually great when DMs house rule it because they can play around with
Mhm.
this for a while and see what they like or don't like and change it at will, do it one way for one
Mhm.
campaign, another way for another. And that becomes almost more effective than when Wizards tells you, here's what the rules are going to do to make it meatier, right? To make it more defined,
Mhm.
more specific.
Right. I mean, one of the just thinking this through, one of the things that I would do if I was designing something like this would be to start with the least possible path forward that would possibly add interest to the game while doing the least amount of damage.
Mhm.
So something like you can move, but that's all you can do.
Yeah. Or you can
And
only help.
that gives right. That gives the players this move, give the player something to do other than roll their death save. They can tactically figure out where do I need to be in the best position to get healed or to
Yeah.
get away from things. So, that's something that if I was designing this, I would start with that, play test it, see what players say. Does this make the game more interesting? Does it add too much? One of the great things about just doing a death save is combat moves much faster.
Yeah.
Uh, you're not getting there's one less player to sit there and try to figure out what exactly to do and the best way to do it. And so I like that about not having the player who's unconscious be able to do anything. It's just death save.
Yeah.
Did you get a 1? Did you get a 20? Fail or save? No. Boom, next player.
And,
And I love running quick games, so actually like that about the unconscious
And
condition.
particularly if we're coming close to a failure state, right? If we're coming close to a total party kill or a we must negotiate with the monsters situation because we're being overwhelmed, we're out of our league, two characters are down. You want to kind of focus on the parts that are really going to make a difference. And so in theory, I would say thematically, concept wise, you would want this injured state to not be, this is how you get out of a TPK, because otherwise it doesn't matter much. If it's as
Mhm,
powerful as a character, it's not really an injured state, right? So th- the people
mhm,
who are down should almost not do much or do very little towards getting out of that failure state. And it should be the other characters that do things like cast that healing spell, use that cool magic item, do whatever that turns it back into a success state. And if you dwell too much on the failure
mhm,
state rounds, you're taking away from that, right? And you're bogging it down
mhm.
in what won't feel like a failure state. It'll just feel like the game in general, right? And that would happen if someone's just doing basic attacks and taking dodge actions. It's like they're still doing full rounds, So then the TPK state, I don't even know what it looks like, and how do you get there? And it would never feel that way, right? But when you're at a table and three players' turns are all skipped because they're just rolling saving throws, you know it's down to the rest of you, right? And that the
Mhm.
action is all
Yeah.
focused on that.
Right. And yeah, and that's another reason I love that
Hmm.
really quick round. The tension, it's like, okay, it's your turn. Boom, boom, boom. It's your turn again. What do you do as everyone
Hmm.
around you is bleeding?
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, this was just a very short, couple minute look at one, cool idea
And it's cool.
taken and really, expounded upon, like game designers, if they're actually designing a game, would. So
Yeah.
I hope that was helpful to Chappy Thoughts and to everyone out there who is interested in game design.
Yeah. And I just want to add one more thing
So are we
there,
ready? Oh,
which is that
yeah.
sometimes you
Go
do an
ahead.
exception to something because there's a reason for it. And so, like organized play special events or store events that we've worked on, we have sometimes added the what if a player, if a player's character dies, because you in a special event you came really excited to be a part of it and you don't want to die early and then not get to participate to be a part of this special event that you probably paid money for or made a big effort to show up. And so in those situations it's really good to think through what happens, right? Should they get to play their ghost form? Should they get to play a minor, a minion that's there, some kind of, weak creature, like some kind of way to bounce back can make a lot of sense because of the type of event you have. And then you draw a box around it, say, for this special event, because of the magic suffused in the area, here's what happens when you go down to zero, because you're specifically looking to keep players engaged. And that's also a really valid way to approach design too, which is to put a big box around it, right? A hard box that limits it.
For sure. Hey, if anybody has thoughts on that, feel free to let us know on all of the places that we will talk about at the end of our show. So, on to our news and commentary section. So, last time we addressed the large open gaming license elephant in the room, and a second elephant has entered the room. As a rumored version of the OGL, and then the actual copy of the OGL just a few minutes ago, were leaked to the media, causing, of course, a bit of a kerfuffle. You can go pretty much anywhere online and learn about this. We have a link in the show notes, and we'll probably add other links to the show notes as more stuff comes out. Um, but I do need to just talk about it in the only way I can. Because of multiple NDAs that I have in many areas, I really can't say anything substantial about any of this. I will say that after we see how everything plays out, which could be a year from now, I will have things to say. I love D&D. It's changed my life in ways that I can't even articulate, and I acknowledge that the game and the hobby have grown to this point in part because of the success of third-party creators. So, I hope and pray and strongly believe that we will see a resolution where everyone can benefit from the growth of this joyful, amazing hobby and spread the joy of role-playing games in D&D far and wide. Teos?
Yeah, that's well said. I have spoken just last night. In fact, I was on the Baldman Games Twitch channel discussing a number of things. We talked about the Open D&D playtest, and we talked about the OGL. And I pretty much said there everything that I could say at this time anywhere else. Um, and I think it's worth acknowledging that this issue has gotten very large, has gotten a lot of attention, and it should. It impacts a lot of people, or could impact a lot of people, and so I think that the discussion is healthy to have. I mean, we wish we weren't having to have this discussion in a lot of ways, but given that what's happened, I think it is very important for creators to think about these kinds of issues, right? Understanding what licenses mean, what can happen around licenses. These are important things for the community to go through, given where we are. I'm also very hopeful that we're going to find some good resolution. Um, there's a lot riding on it. So I really hope it happens. It's been a dark cloud for me over the whole week, and for a lot of people I talk to, it's been, I have designer friends who aren't sleeping. I have designer friends who are like, "Oh, it'll all be fine." It runs the gamut, but the majority of them are, really quite affected by it, and trying to think through what they need to do to work if the environment changes. But we all hope that it'll end up in a good place and not around these areas that's been leaked. So if you're interested on the details of what I think, you can check out that Baldwin Games Twitch channel, the recording that took place on the 8th of January. That really captures everything there. And we'll see. We'll stay tuned, because I think there'll be more information coming out. It's been a fast and furious week, but usually these kinds of issues take longer to settle out.
In other WotC news, there was a report from Bloomberg that WotC has canceled at least 5 video game projects as it scales back its ambitions in the industry. Uh, Teos, I'm going to let you cover this because
Sure.
you were the one that did the deep dive into this article.
Yeah, so it's really fascinating because Bloomberg quotes WotC on this and says, and so the WotC rep has a bunch of language. A lot of it is very kind of business speak. We're committed to using digital games. That there are some projects they're still doing, but they've canceled a number of these. About 15 people will be laid off, and I think that number is as low as it is because a lot of the work is done with independent studios partnering with Wizards of the Coast. And we've seen, in the last few years, 6 game studios that Wizards of the Coast has built, right? Or contracted with others to build. And that's amazing on top of the other contract relationships they have for video games. So there's been a huge investment here, and all of it's now, or at least some aspect of it, is changing dramatically. And to show how kind of fluid this information is, there was a report that one of the games was a D&D game that's been talked about, that Epic Path is creating for Wizards of the Coast. And the lead for this game said, our game is not being canceled. We're actively hiring for this. And then the person who had written the article said, well, they told me your game is canceled. And they said, well, you better go back and confirm with your sources. And they said, we just did. We went back to our original source and to the Wizards of the Coast representative, and we're told this game is canceled. And this person who's working on it is saying it's not. And so, just that's the kind of thing that, somebody's wrong, and it's a major problem that somebody's, not on the same page. But even stepping away from that microcosm, the larger picture to me is one where, Wizards of the Coast has said it's as Magic becomes a $1 billion brand, they want D&D to become a $1 billion brand, and it's about 10 times short from that. And so to get there, you need big things, right? You can't just say print twice the books. That doesn't get you there. You need some very large things to make that happen. Things like TV shows, like movies, like video games. And so if video games aren't working out, that's a worry. And if we're selling E1, the entertainment arm, then maybe, it's one of those things where I get worried, and I get worried in a very specific way. I get worried for the print game, because you and I have worked at a lot of different companies, and one of the worst things is when everybody's working on one thing, and then you can be safe, you can do your thing, right? D&D can just make its books, because it's all going to be carried by video games and huge licenses and things like that. But if somehow that radar turns back towards you and says, well, you're the answer, make the books, make 10 times the revenue next year. How do you do that? And I've had those uncomfortable situations at work. They're not fun at all. It's a really bad level of pressure. And so I hope that does not happen, right? I hope that we don't somehow turn to the books and say, hey, books, make me, a $1 billion company, because that's we're lucky that it's as high a revenue as it is now.
Right.
It would be really unrealistic to expect enormous amounts of gain beyond, a very small gain off of what it already is. So
Yeah,
we'll see
I
how
mean,
that
we've
impacts.
said it. We've said it before, right? The growth, the explosion of D&D is wonderful, and the focus on it has been great. And with any, behind every silver lining there is a cloud, and
Yes.
So navigating that cloud is going to be an interesting part of our hobby for the next few years, and we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
But on the happier side of things, the Lego winner was announced. Dragon's Keep Journey's End by Bolt Builds is the winner. This is the one where the dragon is standing or coming down this tower into the town below, and it will be it will go into development, and you will be able to purchase it at some point. It looks like
Yeah.
it may not be exactly as it is pictured in the winning vote tabulation, but it's going to do it.
Yeah, I mean, that
So
was a really cool one. I mean, congratulations to anybody who got into the final round. That's an amazing
yeah.
achievement and an amazing amount of work. But yeah, this was definitely really cool, and not a shocker to see it picked just because of all the things it pulls into the scene. I will, of course, have to buy this and build it.
Oh, absolutely. Hopefully there will be an adventure with it.
Oh my God, that'd be the
that
best.
would be the best. Yep. And last but not least, we wanted to remind everyone that Winter Fantasy is happening the first weekend of February in lovely, balmy Fort Wayne, Indiana. And tickets are now on sale. You can go to tabletop.events and look for Winter Fantasy number 47. There are tickets for the Tales of Myth Draenor adventures, Moonshine Isles, Dragonlance. You can get games with Adventures League administrators. There are non AL games. Ghostfire Gaming is running Agents of the Empire games. Esper Genesis is running games. The Alien RPG Learn to Play is happening, and much, much more. So it really is a great convention. It's not the easiest place to get to in the middle of or at the beginning of February in the middle of winter, but just for you, the bang for your buck in terms of being able to sit and play games, it's a
Yeah.
wonderful time.
Yeah, it's a
So I
really
hope
cheap place
you,
once you get there. Very affordable, super
yep,
wonderful atmosphere.
for sure. And tell me about your flumps.
My flumps, my flumps. So, it turns out the one more breaking piece of news: the Flumph is coming to the Neverwinter MMO. I was very pleased when I just kind of clicked this link to see, okay, what are they putting into the next lockbox? And it was this little Flumph companion staring at me. So now you can have a Flumph journey alongside your dudes, and I will have to, of course, do this. So I will spend all of the saved up currencies and whatever stupidities are in these kinds of games, and I will chuck them at this problem until I have a Flumph companion. Trust me, I will, I will burn every credit I have stored in the game till I get me one of these gorgeous looking Flumph companions. So you can see the link in the show notes to view it in all of its glory. It looks amazing. So I honestly, I had only like written to each MMO developer's personal address, 8 or 10 times. So I don't know where it's clearly it was a large fan feedback, I'm sure.
Right. You standing outside their home.
Outside their house with a big poster. Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly.